sudden and unexpected escape from Lukla was exciting. Raj found a van pretty quick, but moving ourselves and our gear over to it took some time. Meanwhile, we were surrounded by the depressed people who had been stuck in Ramechaap for days, hoping to get a flight up the mountain. Since Lukla airport was officially closed, none of them were leaving this day. We still had 6 hours to ride back to Kathmandu, but that was better than the 8 hours it took to get us to Ramechaap 2 weeks earlier. We stopped at the same tea house for lunch as we did for dinner the night we came out. In the last video, I mentioned I missed my flight home because the delays in Lukla, but Paul and a couple of gentlemen from Raj's Trek group still had a chance to make their flight, so we drove straight to the airport in Kathmandu. At the airport, I said goodbye to Paul, my roommate, for the last 2 weeks. Since we made plans to hike Kilimanjaro, I would see him again. I mostly just relaxed until our official post-trek dinner. Of course, Paul and Surin couldn't be there. I met David in the hotel lobby. David was a Himalayan Wonders executive that I met at the Annapurna Circuit post-trek dinner. Of course, I also spoke to him on the phone in Lukla when he talked me out of walking down the mountain. He once again assured me that staying over my visa wasn't a big deal. It would just be $5 for each day. I walked with him to meet the family at the local Indian restaurant. The dinner was pleasant. I got another plaque. The family was excited to get home. Insignia looked like she'd been through the ringer. It would be quite a while before she recovered from her injuries. After dinner, we said our goodbyes, but we'd stay in touch on WhatsApp. David was heading straight over to a dinner with Raj and his crew at the Black Olives Cafe, so I tagged along. When we arrived, they were done eating, but they were still chatting about their adventures. This is the same restaurant where Raj, Louise, Jose, and I had dinner after the Annapurna Circuit. I got a beer, but definitely felt like a third wheel. When things were wrapping up, Raj and I got to chat. Although it was warm, he was forced to drink rum because at a fancy restaurant like Black Olives, they don't carry Roxy. When we hugged goodbye, we made plans to meet again before I left to go get a shave. That never happened. I'm sure he was busy with his family, and of course, there was always another trek heading out. The next day was occupied with getting souvenirs. If they didn't take credit cards, they didn't get my business. I had so little money. I got a kukri for Dawson, and a different kind of kukri for Riley, a gong for Julie, and a yak bell for my parents. Finally, I got a prayer wheel for myself. I went back to the Czech pub for lunch and get a proper meal. That night, I walked across town to a fancy mall with a movie theater. I watched the latest Venom movie. When I walked into the theater, a crowd from the previous showing were all still there. They were all crowded around this young lady that was getting selfies. I'm guessing she was some sort of celebrity, but I didn't take a picture, so I have no way of looking her up and finding out who she is. Quite an army of cleaners showed up in between movie showings to make sure the room was clean. On the walk home, I noticed this sign. It's nice to know, even in Kathmandu, if you buy a meal, you can get a free room. The next day, my last full day in Nepal, was spent going to museums. I walked to the Museum of Nepali Art first. This looks like a miniature of the next museum I went to. Berenda Museum is situated in Durbar Square, which is the site of one of the Nepali royal palaces. It was initially built in the 3rd century, but most of the construction came later. A major earthquake in 2015 reduced some of the buildings to rubble. There were signs all over the place talking about the reconstruction efforts, prominently noting that the Chinese government were paying for the repairs. The palace was resplendent, but I found the history the most interesting. While walking with Raj, my Annapurna Circuit guide, he talked about fighting in some sort of conflict, which of course made me wonder which conflict and which side was he on. It seems rude to ask, so I guess I'll never know. A lot of the change has occurred in recent history. In 1990, the monarchy became a constitutional monarchy, sort of like the UK. Then they toyed around with communism for a while. The palace incident was brutal. That was followed by the establishment of the Republic of Nepal, which was almost immediately followed by switching to the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal. Phew, that's a lot of history for 35 years. The walk back was long. The Quality Cafe cracked me up, and the storefront caught my eye. Before flying home, I figured I should get a month of hair knocked off my face. I went back to the Black Olives one last time. I wasn't with any Hindus this time, so I got steak, but it was a mistake. Thin, overcooked, and tough. Himalayan Wonders were there with yet another post-trek party. On the way back to the hotel, I visited one last Irish pub. The next day's ordeal deserves a video of its own. Too bad this is the only picture I took. I got there 3 hours early. The line to just get into the airport was mind-boggling. Multiple lines took serpentine routes, intermingling with each other. Getting past the soldier at the front door of the terminal was only the first step. The terminal was also loaded with lines, but at least there were some ropes separating them. The next line was just to talk to the airline, where they gave me permission to go to the checked baggage line. That line wasn't as long as the outside one, but it moved much slower. The number of soldiers in the checked baggage area was alarming. Next came the line to get yourself and your carry-on luggage checked. It was about the same length, but moved faster. After that, there was a line I was really dreading: customs. The customs line was really slow. While in line, I had lots of time to contemplate my life choices. I knew when I got to the front, I would have to explain why my visa had expired. Well, no surprise, that didn't go well. The woman behind the glass needed her supervisor. The supervisor walked me over to yet another gentleman, who walked me to a counter that he then stood behind. When I got to the front of the little line, I explained as best I could I was stuck in Lukla for 3 days, and that's why I overstayed my visa. An invoice was painstakingly calculated and handed over to me. If I paid $60, I would be allowed to get on my plane. I gave him all my US money and all my Nepali money that was converted for me. I had a little over $30. He agreed to let me pay the rest with a credit card, but the machine wouldn't accept it. Over and over again, the machine reported the same error. I spoke to the credit card company. I called Julie, who was asleep, obviously, who also spoke to the credit card company. The company would lift the block, but as soon as I tried to use the card, a new block would appear. Time ticked away. I was holding up the line. I was asked to sit in front of the supervisor's office and wait. The office was vacant. 10 minutes before my flight was supposed to take off, a guy from the counter came over with a piece of paper with a bank routing number on it and his WhatsApp address. He said if he didn't let me get on the plane, he'd get in trouble. He said he'd pay my outstanding fee if I promised to send him money when I got home. I promised and rushed off to my gate. It was empty. Everyone on my flight had already taken a bus to the plane. The counter personnel got a bus for me. When I got to the plane, it was 2 minutes after when it should have taken off, but there was yet another line. After all the lines, there was another security check at the bottom of the boarding stairs. Turns out I had plenty of time still, and the line was also slow. A total of 7 lines. I could avoid one had I gotten the 3-month visa. Note, 5 of the lines were just for security. I transferred in Delhi again, which had its own set of lines, and 3 of them were security related. During my entire flight home, the US presidential election was going on. While on one of the lines, a local asked me about the election. I told him it wasn't going well. With a big smile on his face, he asked me if I knew Biden. I said no, but he is the president for a little bit longer. He told me I like Biden. I didn't have the heart to tell him that Biden wasn't on the ballot, so I just replied, I like Biden too. My journey home aside, my trip to Nepal was joyous. I followed the run-up to the election as best I could, and I was hopeful. Alas, I landed in a very different country than the one I left.